I bet you've never seen a wedding like this. The luxury, the guests, the glamour, and the crying. Rick Harrison, a billionaire tech CEO, stood tall at the front of his extravagant wedding, his perfectly tailored suit glistening under the chandelier. But the high-end venue's opulence couldn't drown out the relentless screams of his twin children. The guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the air thick with tension. Rick, visibly frustrated, tried everything. He offered them toys, pacifiers, even a glass of water, but nothing worked. The babies cried louder. He shot a glance around the room, eyes narrowing. His patience was running thin. His smile faltered. This was supposed to be the perfect day. His business partners, all seated at the long, polished mahogany table, exchanged awkward glances. The sound of silverware clinking and low murmurs filled the room, but the noise of the crying twins drowned it all. Rick's hands gripped the edge of the table. He muttered under his breath, "Someone make them stop." The staff, clearly uncomfortable, avoided eye contact with him. None dared approach. Jasmine, the black waitress, stood nearby, unnoticed at first. She had seen this kind of scene before. Rich people, entitled and expecting perfection. But this time was different. Jasmine wasn't just there to serve food. She was a witness to a power play that had reached its breaking point. With the room growing colder by the second, Jasmine glanced at the children, her eyes softening. The guests were too afraid to act, frozen by the tension in the air. Rick's frustration continued to mount as his gaze swept the room. It was clear no one was going to help. But Jasmine, steady and calm, took a deep breath and walked towards the children. She moved gracefully, her steps quiet but determined. As she approached the twins, who had been wailing nonstop, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Without saying a word, she leaned down and gently began to sing a soft lullaby. Her voice, smooth and soothing, filled the air. The sound was so unexpected, so out of place in this world of luxury and power, that the room fell silent. It was almost as if time had stopped. The twins, once shrieking in distress, slowly began to quiet down, their little faces calming as they listened to the gentle melody. Rick Harrison, standing at the front of the room, stared in disbelief. He had expected the usual responses, the usual reactions from his staff. But Jasmine had done the impossible. She had done what no one else could. The crying stopped. The room stood still. Jasmine, a waitress, had done what a billionaire CEO could not. She had taken control of the moment, using nothing but grace, calm, and a song. The shift in power was palpable. The people in the room began to murmur, their eyes now on Jasmine. The once invisible waitress had just proven that sometimes the quietest voices carry the most weight. Rick's jaw tightened, and for the first time that day, he didn't know what to do. His empire, his reputation, everything had just shifted in one small act of kindness. The room was still. The twins, once crying uncontrollably, were now peacefully dozing off in their mother's arms. The guests exchanged glances, their shocked expressions slowly morphing into a sense of awe. Rick stood frozen, his face unreadable, his mind racing. He had spent his entire life in control, always the one calling the shots. Yet here he was, unable to do what Jasmine had just done with a few words and a song. The tension in the room slowly began to lift, but Rick couldn't shake the feeling of embarrassment. His carefully curated image of the powerful CEO was beginning to crack. Jasmine, who had always been invisible to the elite in this room, now held the power. She had become the center of attention, and no one could deny it. As she stepped back, her eyes met Rick's. For a moment, there was silence between them. He looked at her, his mind still processing what had just happened. Jasmine, however, didn't flinch. She had seen enough to know what was really important. To her, this wasn't about a power play or a show for the crowd. It was about doing what was right. But Rick was not accustomed to losing control. His gaze shifted from Jasmine to his guests, then back to the twins, and he felt the weight of his position. He had always been the one people looked to for answers. Now he was left questioning himself. The guests began to murmur amongst themselves, the atmosphere shifting from one of tension to curiosity. Whispers filled the air. Who is she? How did she do that? I can't believe she calmed them down like that. Rick's internal struggle continued. He was a billionaire CEO, used to being feared and respected. But now he felt neither. Jasmine had managed to do what he couldn't. And that was a reality he wasn't ready to face. He cleared his throat, trying to regain some semblance of composure. "Thank you," he said, though the words felt hollow coming from him. Jasmine didn't acknowledge him, not with a word or a smile. She simply turned and continued with her duties, moving gracefully among the guests as if nothing had happened. The moment was over, but its impact would last. For Rick, this was a turning point. He had been humbled in front of his guests, his colleagues, and his family. He would have to reckon with the fact that sometimes true power doesn't come from money or status. It comes from something deeper, something Jasmine had in abundance. As the night went on, Rick found it harder to focus on anything but the image of Jasmine standing there, unshaken, a stark contrast to his own crumbling sense of control. He watched her interact with the guests, her calm demeanor infectious. He knew she had the respect of the room now. It was impossible to deny. But the question lingered. How would this moment change him? Would he learn from it, or continue down the path of arrogance that had led him here? Jasmine, on the other hand, moved on with quiet confidence. She had always been underestimated. But tonight, the world had seen her in a different light. And as she continued to serve, she didn't need anyone's approval. She had already proven her worth. As the evening wore on, the guests at Rick Harrison's wedding began to settle into a more relaxed mood, but the atmosphere still felt different. Jasmine, once invisible, had now become an unspoken hero of the night. Rick couldn't shake the image of her standing there, so poised, so effortlessly calm. He had always been in control, the one who dictated the room. But tonight, it was Jasmine who had stolen the spotlight. He tried to focus on the business deals he had set in motion, but his mind kept drifting back to her. He had never considered people like her, waitresses, as anything but part of the background, the service. But she had just proven him wrong in front of everyone. Jasmine continued moving through the room, attending to the guests with the same quiet professionalism. She didn't look for attention, didn't need praise. Her actions spoke louder than any words could. She caught the eye of a few guests who had witnessed her moment of grace. They nodded in acknowledgement, impressed by her poise and strength. It was as though they were finally seeing her for the first time. Jasmine had always known what it felt like to be overlooked. She had grown up in a world that didn't value her, constantly being judged by her skin color, by her job. But tonight was different. Tonight, she had proven that people couldn't be reduced to just one thing. She wasn't just a waitress. She was so much more. Meanwhile, Rick stood off to the side, lost in thought. He could feel the eyes of his guests on him. They were whispering, not about his wealth or his business acumen, but about Jasmine, about how she had done the impossible. He had never felt so exposed. His power, his position, none of it seemed to matter now. For the first time in a long time, Rick felt small. He had worked his entire life to build this empire, to command respect. But Jasmine had made him question everything. He looked at her again, this time noticing the way she moved with purpose, the quiet confidence that radiated from her. It was a stark contrast to his own image of dominance. Jasmine hadn't needed to speak, hadn't needed to assert herself. She had simply done what needed to be done. And that, Rick realized, was the true power. Not in control, not in money, but in knowing when to act, when to listen, when to let others take the lead. As the evening drew to a close, Rick found himself reflecting on the events of the night. The deal he had come here to finalize seemed less important now. It was clear that something deeper had shifted within him. Jasmine had shown him a side of power he had never understood. And as he watched her finish her shift, he knew this was a lesson he would never forget. For Jasmine, the night had ended quietly. She had done her job, had fulfilled her responsibilities, and now, she was ready to go home. But she had no idea that tonight, she had not only changed the course of the evening, but had also left a lasting mark on a billionaire CEO who would never look at her, or anyone like her, the same way again. Days passed after the wedding, but the events of that night continued to weigh heavily on Rick Harrison's mind. He could still see Jasmine, her calm demeanor, and the way she had handled the twins' cries so effortlessly. It had been days, yet he found himself replaying that moment over and over again. As the CEO of a billion-dollar tech empire, he had always prided himself on controlling every aspect of his life. Yet here was this woman, a waitress, who had done something he couldn't. He had spent his career building an image of power, but Jasmine had shown him something far more impactful: humility. Rick couldn't shake the realization that he had been blind to the people around him, to those who didn't fit into his world of wealth and privilege. Jasmine wasn't just a waitress. She was strong, intelligent, and capable of so much more. He couldn't ignore the fact that he had never really seen people like her before, people who worked tirelessly, quietly, without seeking recognition, but who had the power to change everything. He decided he needed to do something. The next day, Rick reached out to his personal assistant, asking to schedule a meeting with Jasmine. He had no idea what he was going to say or how he would even begin this conversation, but something had shifted in him. He wanted to make it right. He wanted to acknowledge her, not as an employee, but as someone who had taught him a lesson he would never forget. Jasmine, however, had no idea that Rick had even noticed her, let alone wanted to meet with her. She had gone back to her routine, doing her job with the same quiet grace she always did. She didn't need recognition, and the last thing on her mind was a meeting with one of the most powerful men in the city. When Jasmine arrived at the meeting, Rick was waiting for her in his office, his usual confidence replaced by something else. As she walked in, she noticed the change in his demeanor. He wasn't the same man who had mocked her at the wedding. There was a humility in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. "Jasmine," Rick started, his voice softer than usual, "I owe you an apology." Jasmine looked at him, surprised. This was not what she expected. "What for?" she asked. Rick paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "For what happened that night," he said. "I was wrong. I underestimated you, and I've spent the last few days realizing how much I misjudged you. You showed me something that I've never seen before. You showed me what true power is." Jasmine stood still, unsure of how to respond. This was a side of Rick she had never seen. She had expected him to continue on his path of arrogance, but instead, he was acknowledging her in a way that felt different. "I've spent my whole life thinking that control and money were the keys to everything," Rick continued. "But you've taught me that sometimes real power comes from humility, from recognizing others for who they truly are." Jasmine still didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, especially not from someone like Rick. "I never expected anything from you," she said softly. "I was just doing my job." Rick nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "And you did it better than anyone else could have." There was a long silence between them. Rick wasn't sure what he was expecting from this meeting, but somehow, it felt like a turning point. He had spent years building his empire, but now he realized that real power wasn't something that could be bought. It wasn't in the deals or the luxury. It was in the people who, like Jasmine, quietly made the world a better place, one small act at a time. Jasmine left the meeting with a sense of quiet pride. She hadn't needed Rick's apology. She had always known her worth, even if no one else did. But somehow, this meeting made her realize that she didn't just matter to her family and her friends. She mattered to people like Rick, too. She wasn't invisible anymore. And that, in itself, was enough. The days following the meeting were quiet, but for Rick Harrison, they were anything but. He found himself thinking about Jasmine constantly, how she had handled the situation at the wedding with grace, how she had so effortlessly earned the respect of everyone in the room. He had never expected someone like her to leave such a lasting impact. Rick had spent years building his empire on the idea of control and dominance, but Jasmine had shown him that true strength came from humility, kindness, and the ability to see people for who they truly were. For the first time in a long time, he felt a shift in himself. He was no longer just the CEO who made decisions from behind a desk. He was learning, growing, and questioning his old beliefs. One afternoon, Rick decided he needed to do more than just apologize to Jasmine. He had already acknowledged her in their private meeting, but he wanted to show her that he truly understood the lesson she had taught him. He had spent hours thinking about how to approach this, and finally, he had an idea. He reached out to Jasmine, asking if she would meet him for lunch. When she arrived, Rick greeted her with a genuine smile, something that hadn't been there before. "Jasmine," he said, his voice calm and sincere, "I want to thank you again for everything. But this time, I don't just want to talk. I want to do something for you." Jasmine raised an eyebrow, unsure of what he meant. "What do you mean?" she asked. Rick motioned for her to sit down, his demeanor more relaxed than usual. "You've taught me more in one evening than I've learned in years. I've spent my life building wealth and power, but you've shown me that there's something much more important than all of that. You've taught me about respect, about understanding, about the value of every person, no matter their background. Jasmine listened, still unsure of what he was getting at. Rick continued, I know that money and power don't define a person's worth, but I also know that sometimes the right opportunities can make a difference. I want to offer you something. Not because you need it, but because you deserve it. He paused, watching her closely. I want to help you open your own cafe, one that's inclusive, where people like you, like everyone, can find a place to belong. I've seen how hard you work, how much you've given to others, and I believe you deserve a chance to follow your dream. Jasmine sat there, speechless. She had never imagined something like this. She had worked so hard, always in the background, always invisible, to the world that only saw her as a waitress. But now, here was Rick Harrison, one of the most powerful men she knew, offering her a chance to build something of her own. Rick, she started, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know what to say. Rick smiled, his eyes softening. You don't need to say anything. I just want you to know that you've made a difference in my life. And I want to help make a difference in yours. Jasmine felt a lump in her throat. She had spent so much time fighting for recognition, for respect. But now, it seemed that she was finally being seen for who she truly was. Thank you, she said quietly, her eyes filling with gratitude. This means more to me than you could ever know. Rick nodded, understanding the weight of her words. For both of them, this was a new beginning. Jasmine would no longer just be the invisible woman in the background. She would be the woman who took control of her own future. And Rick, well, he had learned a lesson that would stay with him forever. The power of humility, the power of understanding, the power of truly seeing people. And for once, he realized that this was the kind of power that mattered most. It had been a few weeks since Rick made the offer, and Jasmine had spent every waking moment thinking about it. The opportunity was incredible, life-changing even. But part of her struggled with the idea of leaving behind the world she had known for so long. As a waitress, she had always been invisible to the high society she served. But now, Rick was offering her a chance to create something of her own, to carve out a space where she could be seen, not just as a server, but as a business owner, a leader. Still, doubts lingered. Could she really do this? Was she ready to step into a world that was so far removed from the life she had known? Jasmine had always been independent, but this was different. It wasn't just about paying the bills or keeping her head above water anymore. This was about taking control of her destiny. One afternoon, Rick called her. Jasmine, I've been thinking a lot about our conversation, he said. I know this is a big decision for you, and I don't want to rush you into anything. But I also want to make sure you have all the resources you need to succeed. Jasmine paused, sitting down on the edge of her bed. I appreciate that, Rick. I really do. But it's just so overwhelming. I've worked so hard just to get by, and now I'm being asked to take on something so much bigger. Rick's voice softened, filled with understanding. I get it. I really do. But remember, you don't have to do this alone. I'm here to help every step of the way. You've already proven you have what it takes. All I'm offering is a chance to make it happen on your terms, with the resources and support to back it up. Jasmine felt a lump form in her throat. He was right. She had been working for others her entire life, always helping them build their dreams while putting her own on hold. Maybe it was time to change that. Maybe it was time to build her own dream. She took a deep breath. Okay, she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. I'll do it. I'm ready to give it a shot. Rick's tone brightened. That's the spirit. You won't regret it, Jasmine. I'll have my team work with you to get everything set up. Over the next few weeks, Jasmine worked with Rick's team, learning everything she could about running a business, from the logistics of setting up a cafe to marketing and finance. It was a lot to take in, but Jasmine was determined. She didn't want to let this opportunity slip away. As the cafe began to take shape, Jasmine couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This was her vision, her dream, coming to life. She had worked hard for this moment, and now it was finally within reach. On opening day, Jasmine stood in front of the cafe, a small but beautiful space she had poured her heart into. The sign above the door read, Jasmine's Cafe, a name that felt both empowering and humbling. She had come a long way from being the quiet waitress in the background. The doors opened, and the first customers walked in, and Jasmine couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning. Rick had given her the tools to succeed, but it was her hard work, her dedication, and her resilience that would carry her forward. She wasn't just building a cafe. She was building a life, one that was entirely her own. And for the first time in a long time, Jasmine felt truly seen. Months passed, and Jasmine's cafe was thriving. The once small dream she had worked so hard for had become a reality, and now, it was more than just a business. It was a symbol of everything she had overcome. The cafe had become a beloved spot in the neighborhood, a place where people came to enjoy good food, great coffee, and the warm, welcoming atmosphere Jasmine had created. Every morning, she greeted her customers with a smile, knowing that this was where she truly belonged. But despite her success, Jasmine never forgot where she came from. She remembered the long nights spent working as a waitress, the feeling of being invisible to the world around her. Now, she made sure that no one who walked into her cafe felt the way she had felt back then. Every person who came in was treated with respect and kindness, no matter their background. The success of the cafe was a testament to Jasmine's hard work and resilience, but it was also a reminder of the lessons she had learned. She had learned that power wasn't about money or status. It was about how you treated others, how you lifted them up when they were down. Rick had shown her that, but it was her own strength and determination that had carried her this far. As time went on, Jasmine became more than just a business owner. She became a mentor, someone who could help others achieve their own dreams. She started offering classes and workshops to young women who wanted to start their own businesses, teaching them the skills she had learned along the way. She also created a scholarship fund for students who couldn't afford college but had the drive and passion to succeed. Rick, who had become a close friend and confidant, often visited the cafe, but Jasmine always made sure that it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the community she had built, the people who had supported her, and the lives she had touched. Rick had helped her find her footing, but it was her own hard work and determination that had made her cafe what it was. One day, as they sat together in a corner booth, Rick looked at Jasmine and said, "I'm proud of you. You've done something incredible here." Jasmine smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. "Thank you. But this isn't just me. It's about all of us, about the people who believed in me, who helped me when I needed it the most." Rick nodded, his expression softening. "You've shown me that there's more to life than just business. You've shown me what real success looks like." Jasmine glanced around her cafe, taking in the bustling atmosphere, the sound of laughter, and the smell of fresh coffee. She had built something truly special. And for the first time in her life, she felt proud of what she had achieved, not because of the money or the recognition, but because she had created something that mattered. She had created a space where people could be themselves, where they could find comfort and connection. And that, she realized, was the true power. The power to make a difference, to change lives, to show people that they mattered. She had learned that lesson long ago, but now, she was living it every single day. As the months went by, Jasmine's cafe continued to flourish, becoming not only a successful business, but a cornerstone of the community. She had created a place where people of all backgrounds felt welcome, where they could find comfort in a cup of coffee and a warm smile. The cafe was more than just a business. It was a reflection of everything Jasmine had worked for and believed in. But even with all her success, there was a part of Jasmine that still carried the weight of her past. The memories of those long nights spent waiting tables, of being overlooked and undervalued, lingered in her mind. She knew that there were still people out there who saw her for nothing more than what she used to be, the woman behind the tray. And yet, in her cafe, she was something different. She was a leader, a mentor, someone who had created something meaningful. One afternoon, as she was preparing for the evening rush, Rick came by for one of his regular visits. He had become a close friend over the past few months, and Jasmine always looked forward to their conversations. He had been one of the few people who truly understood the journey she had been on and the challenges she had faced. "How's it going today?" Rick asked, settling into his usual spot at the counter. Jasmine smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. "Same as always. Busy but good. I'm really starting to feel like this place is making a difference." Rick nodded, his eyes scanning the cafe. "You've done something incredible here, Jasmine. This place is thriving, and so are you." Jasmine's smile faltered for a moment. "It's hard to believe sometimes, you know? I've worked so hard to get here, and sometimes I still wonder if it's all real." Rick leaned forward, his voice gentle. "It's real, and you've earned every bit of it." Jasmine's thoughts wandered to the people who had helped her along the way, the loyal customers who kept coming back, the employees who had become like family, and Rick, who had believed in her from the very beginning. She had come so far, but there was still so much more she wanted to do. "I want to do more," Jasmine said, her voice filled with determination. "I want to help other people who were in the same position I was. I want to show them that they can do this too, that they can create something of their own." Rick smiled, his eyes lighting up with pride. "That's exactly what I was hoping for when I offered to help you. You've got the power to make a difference, Jasmine. And now you're in a position to help others find their own path." Jasmine nodded, feeling a new sense of purpose wash over her. She had learned so much over the past few months, not just about running a business, but about herself. She had learned that success wasn't just about the numbers or the accolades. It was about the impact you had on others, the way you made people feel. And now, she was ready to share that with the world. "I think it's time for the next step," she said, her voice steady and confident. "I'm going to start a mentorship program for young women who want to open their own businesses. I want to give them the resources and support they need to succeed, just like I had." Rick's smile widened. "That's amazing, Jasmine. I knew you had it in you." Jasmine took a deep breath, feeling a sense of pride she had never known before. She had started this journey with nothing but a dream, and now she was on the verge of making that dream even bigger. She wasn't just building a business, she was building a legacy. And for the first time in her life, Jasmine felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The mentorship program Jasmine started quickly became a cornerstone of her cafe's legacy. Each week, young women from different walks of life came to learn from her. They were eager, hopeful, and many had stories that mirrored her own. Dreamers who had spent years working for others, waiting for a chance to create something of their own. Jasmine welcomed them all with open arms, offering them the same support and guidance she had received, but with the wisdom she had gained from her own struggles. As the months passed, the program began to gain attention. Local newspapers featured stories about the cafe and Jasmine's efforts to empower others. Rick, who had always believed in her, continued to be a steadfast supporter, offering advice and connecting her with influential people who could further her mission. With his help, Jasmine was able to expand the program, bringing in successful women entrepreneurs to speak with the mints, sharing their journeys and offering insights into the challenges of starting a business. The cafe, once a small dream, had now become a thriving hub for entrepreneurship and empowerment. Jasmine's name was becoming known not just in her neighborhood, but in the city as well. She had gone from being a waitress to a business owner, and now she was helping others rise as she had. One day, as she sat in her office, looking out over the cafe floor, Jasmine couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. She remembered the days when she had struggled just to pay the bills, when she had doubted her ability to ever achieve anything beyond her job as a waitress. But now, she had built something real, something that mattered. She had a successful cafe, a mentorship program that was changing lives, and a community of people who believed in her. Jasmine was no longer just a woman who served coffee. She was a leader, a mentor, a woman who had created her own destiny. And as she looked out at the busy cafe, filled with customers and her team working together, she realized that she had done it. She had not only changed her own life, but had given others the tools to change theirs too. She was living proof that no matter where you start, no matter how small or insignificant you might feel, you can rise, you can achieve, and you can make a difference. For Jasmine, this was only the beginning. She had a new goal now, to continue growing her cafe, to help even more women reach their potential, and to prove that the power of kindness, hard work, and humility could change the world.